Welcome into NFL on 365 Sports. I'm your host, Grayson Grundhafer, and today we are starting a series I'm really excited about. We're going to go through a few of the teams in the NFL, talk about their draft strategy, talk about the needs on the team, and kind of what these teams might try to accomplish before the April 28th draft, and then, of course, once it starts on April 28th as well. And today we're going to talk about the team that I think a lot of people were hopeful was going to win the Super Bowl, or maybe not hopeful, but maybe thought that they would win the Super Bowl, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason this team is so intriguing is just because of all the draft capital they have added up. I mean, it's really shocking how much draft capital a team this good has going into the NFL draft. So we're going to go through their first 4 round of picks. I have a few kind of news and notes on them. I also have a potential trade-up scenario for them as well. But overall, it's going to be kind of, what are they going to address at each pick? And also the player that I think makes the most sense for them. So starting with pick number 29 in the NFL draft is Christian Watson. So I look at the Chiefs roster and I go, okay, they lost Tyreek Hill. I know they went out and got MVS, and they were able to add him as a deep threat, a guy who I think can come in and really help them space the field. And, when you got guys like Juju and Travis Kelce, you need guys on the outside that can really stretch a defense deep and also make contested catches down the sideline and in the intermediate passing game. So what we know about MVS is he's not going to be a huge factor in the intermediate routes. He's not going to be a huge factor in the short routes. He really is truly just a deep threat. And while that's great, I think they want to bring in someone who can maybe grow with Patrick Mahomes. And the thing I look at when I look at this roster is that Juju's on a 1-year contract. Travis Kelce's getting older. Mecole Hardman has never broken out to the degree that many people thought he would. And that's pretty much it. So they need young talent to come in from this draft to try to replace Tyreek Hill, and I think this is the first pick they go about addressing it. Watson out of North Dakota State is 6'4", ran really well at the combine. He's got blazing speed. He's going to be able to take the top off the defense, but I also think there's a high ceiling there because I still view him very much as a raw prospect. His drop rate is a little alarming. That's an area where is it just something he's not very good at? Or was it just the situation he was in at North Dakota State? I don't know, because when you play at North Dakota State, you're probably going to be the best player on the field for many of those games. So the drops are kind of one of those things where how open was he on these drops? And when you get to the NFL, you're going to have a lot more opportunities for contested catches, but you're also going to be forced to make more contested catches. So I'm a little concerned about that, but the athleticism, the talent, and the upside is there for Christian Watson. So then the very next pick that the Chiefs have at pick 30, and this is a situation where they could package those, trade up, try to get a great wide receiver. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But at pick 30, I think they try to take a best available defensive player. Now, they need to address the defensive end spot. They got to get some pass rushing, but they also need help in the secondary. And when you look around the AFC, you see all these quarterbacks, you see these dynamic wide receivers. You have to be able to slow them down to some extent. And so I think Kareem Elam out of Florida, the 6'1", 191 cornerback, he gives you great length, great size, has 5 interceptions in his career, so has shown some ability to create turnovers. He's physical. I think he's a perfect fit for what they need at cornerback, and it's a situation where I just think they need to address it. They got to get better on the back end, and I think Elam would come in and help them pretty immediately. Then at pick 50, this is in round 2. The Chiefs have these 2 picks. They have a wide receiver. They have a cornerback. They've addressed some needs. And now this is where I think true upside comes into play. The Chiefs are a really good team. They're going to win double-digit games. I think they can take some risks in this draft. And David Ojabo, the edge rusher, defensive end, linebacker, hybrid type out of Michigan, he was going to be a top 20 pick. He was actually trending up to be a top 15 pick, and then he tore his Achilles, which was really hard to watch, during the process to see that happen to him. But great value here at pick 50. Hit 11 sacks last year, an explosive pass rusher, a guy you're going to have to wait a year on, But I think after watching Cam Akers' recovery timeline, I think you can pretty much anticipate that Ojabo is going to be just fine, not for this upcoming year, but for the next year, and could give you an elite pass rusher, which is something the Chiefs desperately need for their future. So I think the value is too good for a team that has all this draft capital. They have an opportunity to take a risk here, and I think it's going to pay off for them in the long run. Moving on to a situation where I'm going to package some picks and I'm going to move up for the Chiefs in this draft. And the reason for it is because I do think they have to get a defensive end, and I think it's a premium in this draft. You got to be able to move up and find a guy who I think can really impact the game, especially this year. Since you're going to be waiting on Ojabo, they have to find a way to move up and try to get a guy that can come in and help right away. So Cameron Thomas out of San Diego State is the guy that I'm targeting for the Chiefs. I think you're probably going to have to move up to pick number 65 in order to get him, but they have the picks to do it. So trade pick number 94 and pick 121 and maybe a 7th, depending on how stingy the trade value is. But I think you can probably get that and move up to pick 65. You take Cameron Thomas there. He had 11 and a half sacks this year, 20 and a half tackles for loss, 280 pounds. I think he fits what they need up front. He'll help them in the run game. He'll help them as a pass rusher. And I think he's a guy that's definitely worth trading up for if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. Moving on to their next pick. So that's at pick 65. And actually, so then they also have a pick at 62. So I guess I'm going to have to recycle and go back a little bit here. But at pick 62, I think it's another great opportunity for them to target a wide receiver. And for that reason, I'm having them take George Pickens out of Georgia. So the consistent theme here is I think the Chiefs can take chances in this draft. And George Pickens was injured, did not get to play a ton this past year. Really, since his freshman year, has not shined the way I think everyone thought he would. But a 2.1% drop rate, a guy with very consistent, steady hands, reminds me a lot of Mike Williams, the Chargers wide receiver, and would give Patrick Mahomes another elite wide receiver on the outside. So you pair Pickens with Watson, one guy who's a great, has shown great ability to catch the football. Another guy who's more of a project, a guy that you're kind of trying to mold into a perfect wide receiver for your receiving room. So I think this is a great start for them in this draft at wide receiver. I think they'll be done at wide receiver unless they try to find a slot guy maybe later on in the draft. So now moving on to the third round, their last pick in the third round since they traded pick 94, and that's going to be J.T. Woods out of Baylor at pick 103. Again, I think the Chiefs need help in the secondary. I think they need a guy who can come in and create turnovers while also add speed to that group. And J.T. Woods, 8 interceptions the last 2 seasons, provides great range. And I think he's a steal when you get him outside the top 100. I mean, this is a guy who has shown on film he's always around the football, can make plays for you, create turnovers. And I think that's something the Chiefs desperately need. We saw the Bengals last year in the playoffs. Their defense created turnovers. It allowed them to not have to score an obscene amount of points to win games. The Chiefs need to be able to do that, have guys who create those turnovers, get the ball back to the offense, and allow the Chiefs to extend leads or come back in football games because of it. I think J.T. Woods is a perfect fit for what the Chiefs need in the back end. So those are some of the picks that I really like for the Chiefs. Those are some of the guys who I think fit really well for them, and kind of in order of where I see them getting taken in the NFL draft. Now, let's get into a few other fits that I think are possibilities throughout the draft. I just didn't pick them here in this one. So at pick 30, Daxton Hill out of Michigan, the safety, another long, rangy, athletic guy who I think would fit really well there. Drake Jackson, a pass rusher at pick 29. If they want to spend a pick early on an edge guy, I think Drake Jackson at USC is probably the way to go. And then finally at pick 50, if this guy falls there, I think he'd be a great pick and a steal for them. I just don't think he's going to fall all the way to pick 50, and that's Jalen Petrie out of Baylor. Another great fit for the Chiefs. They need a nickel-type guy who can play multiple safety positions while creating havoc as far as a guy who can get in the backfield and create sacks, create fumbles, and then also in coverage create interceptions as well. So that's kind of my mock for the Chiefs, their first 3-4 rounds, some of the potential guys that they could land in the NFL draft. It's getting close. It's almost here, April 28th, and the Chiefs have a long way to go, and we have a long way to go talking about many of the other NFL teams as the draft approaches. But for Grayson Grunaver, this has been NFL on 365 Sports.